welcome back. Today we're in the second part of the Apocalypse of Abraham. And I'll put a link, of course, to the first part in the description of this video. I want to thank you for joining with me again today and look back at the first part to see how Abraham, in his younger days, rejected the idol worship of his father and became a worshiper of what later would be called the Hebrew or the Jewish God. And that ended in chapter 8 of the Apocalypse of Abraham, a first century Jewish writing. Now, Abraham meets God, and the Lord introduces himself this way. Here I am, he said. Behold, it is I. Fear not, for I am before the world. The mighty, the God who created previously before the light of the age I am, and the protector for you, and I am your helper. And the first thing that God is going to ask Abraham to do is to make a sacrifice, make a pure sacrifice. And in this sacrifice, I will place the ages, and I will announce to you guarded things, and you will see great things which you have not seen, because you desired to search for me, and I called you my beloved. But for 40 days, abstain from every kind of food cooked by fire, and from drinking of wine, and from anointing yourself with oil. And then you shall set out for me the sacrifice which I commanded you. So now we learn that Abraham has been approached by his God, the one that he will grow to have faith in. We're going to see what are some of the things that make this apocalypse considered apocalyptic literature other than the title. And the first thing is that it's pseudographic writing. That is, it is writing by an unknown author in the name of an ancient and famous person, in this case, Abraham. Obviously, this was not written by Abraham. This is part of the Apocrypha of the Jewish writings. It is not in their holy text, nor is it in the Christian Bible, but was written after the destruction of the Jewish temple in 70 CE, and is representative of the apocalyptic literature that was written during that time. Now, all apocalypses have a seer, that is, a righteous person who has a vision or is taken into the higher realms of divinity. And in this case, of course, it's going to be Abraham. The second thing is that these seers find the information and the images of the vision hard to understand, and they have no access to these spiritual realms on their own. And so a spirit guide or an angel is appointed to them. In this case, as soon as Abraham realizes that he's being spoken to by this unknown God that he is being drawn to, he collapses in a faint. And God assigns Joel, an angel, to be his guide, who stands him up, restores his strength, and says that he'll be the one to lead and guide him through this heavenly journey. And so he's going to be taken to the place of divinity. And there the seer receives divine revelations. And that's exactly what happens to Abraham. He sees the beginnings of the world. He sees Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and he'll see his people. He'll also eventually understand that the temple built to worship God will be destroyed, but he'll have a hope of a coming relief for his people. He'll see all of these things in this vision quest. Now, as we already mentioned, Abraham is going to make a sacrifices on behalf of Abraham to cement the covenant that he has with God are mentioned in the book of Genesis in the Jewish scriptures. And in those sacrifices, a certain group of animals are actually sacrificed. But there are also some unclean birds mentioned. Genesis doesn't tell us why they're part of the sacrifice, but here we see that a turtle dove and a pigeon will be given to Joel and Abraham, and they're going to ascend on the wings of these birds to the heavenly realms. And it is because of being lifted up by these birds that they'll be able to receive the divine revelations of God. Now, as Abraham waits for evening to make his sacrifice, the evening sacrifices, a strange thing happens. He is approached by an unclean bird that comes down upon the carcasses of the animals, and he has to drive this unclean bird away. And the unclean bird speaks to him. Now we're going to see that the description of this bird and who he is and his position as opposed to Abraham's position is an explanation of evil, or what in some writings is called Satan or Beelzebub or the devil. So this is the explanation of this evil force in this apocalypse. It says, the unclean bird spoke to me and said, Abraham, what are you doing upon these holy heights where no man eats or drinks, nor is there upon them food for man? But these heavenly beings consume everything with fire and will burn you up. Forsake the man who is with you and flee, for if you ascend into the heights, they will make an end of you. And so he is tempting Abraham, lying to him, telling him that if he does not leave Joel and forsake this mission, he'll find himself in deep trouble and will be destroyed. It came to pass, when I saw the bird speak, I said to the angel, what is this, Lord? And he said, this is ungodliness. This is Azazel. Now, I wasn't sure how to pronounce that. And so I went to pronunciation on the internet, and I went to 3 different sites, and I got 3 different pronunciations. The one I liked best was Azazel, and so that's the one I'm going to use, Azazel. And he said to it, disgrace upon you, Azazel, for Abraham's lot is in heaven, but yours is upon the earth, because you have chosen and loved this for the dwelling place of your uncleanness. Therefore, the eternal, mighty Lord made you to be a dweller upon the earth, and through you, every evil spirit of lies, and through you, wrath and trial for the generations of ungodly men. So here we have Azazel, who apparently has chosen evil upon the earth, loved the earth, and so God has banished him to the earthly realm. Let me continue. God, the Almighty One, has not permitted that the bodies of the righteous should be in your hand, in order that thereby the life of the righteous and the destruction of the unclean may be assured. Hear this, my friend, and be gone with shame from me. For it has not been given to you to play the tempter in regard to all the righteous. Depart from this man. You cannot lead him astray. He is an enemy to you and to those who follow you and love what you desire. For behold, the vesture which in heaven was formerly yours has been set aside for him, and the mortality which was his has been transferred to you. So the man Abraham and the evil spirit have had their places transformed. The mortality that was Abraham's now belongs to the evil spirit. He will cease to exist. He will be destroyed. And his place in heaven has been given to the righteous man, Abraham. In the first century, and among the first century peoples, as they worship their various gods, no one lived in a bubble. They all had contacts available with other groups. And there is always some discussion in these writings about who influenced who, which writing came first, does one rely upon another? And that's quite interesting in itself. The Apocalypse of Abraham, people have wondered, was the writer influenced by the Essenes or by the Qumran community that was in existence just prior to this time, by the Enochian writings, by the Gnostics, and the other Christian groups? And it's very difficult to discern who is influencing who, or if it's just the idea that these thoughts were becoming available to different groups of people at about the same time. Now, the first thing, perhaps, of importance that happens to Abraham as they finally ascend into the higher realms is that Joel instructs him in a beautiful liturgical song and tells him to worship God. And as he begins to sing this song, which some believe has been influenced by Gnostic teachings, and that's why I brought up that subject of the influence one on the other. It is beautiful, and it does sound very Gnostic in some of its description of God. Let me just read a couple of lines. Eternal, mighty, holy El, God only supreme, you are the self-originated, the beginningless, unforgotten, spotless, immortal, self-perfected, self-devised, without mother, without father, ungenerated, exalted, fiery. And this goes on for many, many verses. And perhaps there is some Gnostic influence there. Some of the terminology is certainly the same. But as Abraham then begins to worship God by singing this song, and Joel tells him to sing it from beginning to end without stop. As he sings this worship song, the mouth of the fire, which was above him, was rising up on high, and he heard the voice of God, and he began to see a vision, and it is a throne vision, and it is very reminiscent of the vision of God, the chariot vision found in the book of Ezekiel in the Jewish writings. So perhaps this is, again, one group or one writing influencing that of another. Well, he begins to see some additional things, and we're going to see that he sees Adam and Eve, and there is an explanation of how evil entered the human world. It says, I looked into the picture, into the vision, and my eyes ran to the side of the Garden of Eden. And I saw there a man of imposing height and mighty in stature, incomparable in aspect. And he was embracing a woman who likewise approximated to the aspect of his size and stature. And they were standing under a tree in the Garden of Eden. And the fruit of this tree was like a bunch of grapes of the vine. And standing behind the tree was one who had the aspect of a serpent, having hands and feet like those of a man, and wings on its shoulders, 6 pairs of wings, so that there were 6 wings on the right and 6 on the left. And he was standing something like a dragon in form, but having hands. And he was holding the grapes of the tree and feeding them to the 2 I saw. And so Abraham, of course, asks who they are and what is happening. And this, the man and the woman, represent Adam and Eve, and he who is between them represents ungodliness and their beginnings on the way of perdition. Well, he continues to see his people. He is told that the people are like the stars of the firmament, and he watches as there are some good in his people and some who worship idols and are punished in his people. And eventually he comes to the place where he sees the temple destroyed. And he says, I looked and saw, behold, the picture swayed, and from it emerged on the left side an ungodly people, and they pillaged those who were on the right side, men and women and children, and some they murdered, and some they kept as slaves. And I saw them run towards them through the 4 entrances, and they burned the temple with fire, and the holy things that were therein were all plundered. And Abraham's heart was torn by the vision. As the apocalypse ends, God gives him hope and returns him to the earth to consider what he has seen. And see, Abraham, what you have seen, and hear what you have heard, and take knowledge of all you have come to know. Go to your heritage, and behold, I am with you unto the age. And while he was still speaking to me, I found myself once again on the earth. And I said, O Eternal One, I'm no longer in the glory which was on high. And he continues to ask God for explanations, and that is when the Lord tells them that a time of relief will come to his people. Now, as I've given you a few of the details, and there is much, much more to the Apocalypse, which actually has a 32, I believe it's 32 chapters, short chapters, is available for you to read in PDF form, different translations online, and I'll put a link to at least one of them in the description. But a couple of things that were questions in the time that were written are determinism or predestination and dualism. Remember, dualism was very much a part of the Gnostic teachings. And so we see some dualism here. We see certainly a difference between the righteous people and those who've gone astray, between Abraham and Azazel, between the heaven and the earth, between this world and the world of relief, the kingdom of the Messiah, which is to come, and the people divided into two on the left and the right. We see mysticism here, which was very much a part of some in the Jewish faith, some of the mystical Jewish writers, and certainly the Gnostics. We also see a sort of a discussion under the surface that we can talk about of determinism. And sometimes it seems as though God has made the decisions for people. If you look this up and you're reading it, you might see that in chapter 22, verses 2 and 5, it seems to teach determinism, and also in chapter 14 and verse 2. But there's also plenty of times where people have choice. Not only people, but angels have choice. Azazel has made the choice to love the earth, and Abraham has had free choice to follow God. And the people had choice to follow good or evil. So it seems to be sort of partial determinism. God has determined that Abraham would be the founder of a people and they would be his people. We call that divine election. So there definitely seems to be divine election here. But I call it, and others have called it, partial determinism because there is also freedom of choice. Abraham and the people, and even the evil, what become the evil spirits, have the choice to choose good or evil. So it seems that God makes some election of people that he will call his people, but everyone also has a choice as to the path they'll take. Well, that was some of the things that were discussed around the time of the writing, and especially after the destruction of the temple. The question would be, had God determined that destruction of the temple, or was it based upon the evil choices of people? People have the freedom to choose the wrong way. And it seems that that is the case. And it seems that this is not the end for God's people. There was some real devastation and destruction to the hearts of the Jewish believers when the city of Jerusalem and their temple of worship was destroyed. But this gives them hope that a time will come when it's not the end for them. A time will come, a time of relief, and a time of a better world. So I hope that you'll look up this Apocalypse of Abraham. Give it a read. It doesn't take that long, and it's interesting to see what people were thinking and how they understood their world and in the first century Judaism. And I hope, if you haven't done so, that you'll leave your comments and questions and also subscribe to this channel and make suggestions if there are certain things that you'd like to learn about. It seems that more people watch the videos about specific groups than watch the videos about specific writings. So if you have a preference, I want you to share it with me so that I'm providing on this YouTube channel the things that you, the viewer, want to learn about. So I hope you'll join me again next time. Have a really good week, and I'll try to upload again next Saturday.